Joe Cunningham and Toby Smith are running on the Democratic side for the 1st Congressional District, and their primary is coming up in 3 weeks. In this special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, I sit down with Toby Smith one-on-one. And be sure to download the free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores. Toby Smith,
Quintin.
it's so good to see you again.
It's good to see you too.
I appreciate this.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I know that you've been campaigning from here to Beaufort and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
What is that one word to describe your campaign right now?
Exhilarated. I'm having a great time, Quintin. Since I saw you the last time, I was just getting my feet wet, didn't know what I was into, and now I'm about knee-deep, and it's awesome. I've always been a proud Southerner,
Okay.
but I'm falling in love with this app again. The richness, our history, exposure to Beaufort has been amazing.
Yeah.
And I have been treated well and have met with engaging and engaged voters who have a number of intriguing questions. It's not about what's going on Pennsylvania Avenue. It's about what's going on in their house locally. And that has led to a lot of very interesting conversations.
You talk about those conversations. What is one particular question that still plays in your mind right now?
People want to know why our kids are not safe in school. It is the most pressing issue. People are really afraid, Quintin, that when they drop their kids off at 8, they might not see them again at 3:30. And they don't understand why adults can't come together to solve this problem. At least come up with ways to help keep children safe. That is followed closely by healthcare. What happens if I lose my insurance? Because all it takes is one thing to happen and there go the savings. So that's another very frightening piece as well. And what is challenging for people is that it appears that no one in Washington is listening because they're doing their usual amount of bickering. They're not hearing what people are saying.
What should they hear from people right now?
I think that they should hear that their politicians, their representatives, their senators, are hearing and feeling their pain. I think that that's important. I think they should hear that it matters what's going on in these households. I think they should hear that I am the access for you. And so what I'm doing every day is trying to figure out how to make things better. Because you work for the 1st District. And when you don't feel that anybody's listening, you either just disengage completely, and that's dangerous.
You talk about, obviously people coming together, and I know you have support for your particular campaign. You said this on May 24th on Facebook, quote, "I'm very grateful to receive this from Moms Demand Action and will continue to work to keep our children, all of our children, teachers and staff safe. We have a charge to keep." So talk to me about that particular endorsement from the Moms Demand Action.
That was so sweet, Quintin, because from the beginning I've talked about safety in schools. I've hit just about every meeting that I could go to raise the issue of parents, how they feel about their kids. I was able to go to the Kids March, the March that the children did out at Waterfront Park in North Charleston. That was awesome. It was all done by high school children, high school youngsters, not children. So one of the pieces of that endorsement says to me, we've heard you, and we know that you are at the forefront of this conversation around safety. Just here recently, Quintin, for the first time, we lost a teacher. It's devastating what's happening in these schools. And I know that the year is ending, but I'm hoping that we're going to, over the summer, do some things so that we put in place some measures so that when September or August roll around again, there'll be less fear and less concern that we're not hearing.
So if you were to be elected to Congress and you come back, the next time around, what will be the first thing you do as Congresswoman?
The first thing to do, Quintin, is to get the lay of the land, find out where everything is, who all the key players are. Let me lay out a scenario. If the Democrats should win the House back, there's going to be massive turnover. All of the Republican committees that are there now will have to be shrunk. Democratic committees will have to be enlarged. Everything will literally shift hands. For the first few months, there's not going to be a lot of legislating going on. But that's the time that I hope to use to build some bipartisan consensus to find out who everybody is, who shares my views, who might be willing to co-sponsor legislation with me That's going to be a very exciting time, and I sure hope that that happens.
And I know that just recently you went over to Daniel Allen Marina to talk to basically the constituents
Yes.
about jobs, healthcare, education, gun safety, and the environment. Where are we with jobs in your mind?
We have an enormous number of very good, high-paying jobs here in Charleston. And I want to take it from two angles.
Okay.
For young people who are coming in, particularly those who are interested in the tech field, the
Right.
digital corridor is off the chart. People are doing great, but they can't find affordable housing. That's a problem. The second issue is we have a number of people who already live here who are holding down 2 and 3 less paying positions, which leads to instability in the household. If we could get those folks into 25 an hour, 30 an hour, now all of a sudden everything looks a little bit better. And we have the jobs, we have the people. The part that's missing, Quintin, is the bridge to connect the two. When I worked at a food pantry a few years ago, we actually started a program to help connect people with higher paying jobs. And it was beginning to bear fruit. So I think that that's the key, and that's one of the things, because the wage gap is important to me. And particularly because when you look at young moms who are working, but they're often working so much they're not home with the children. And it's not just young moms. Beaufort County has a very high rate of single dads who are holding it down. And we never give a shout out to single dads, but we should. And they face the same challenges. So if you can pair people with higher paying positions, then that leads to stability in the household, stability in the community, and hopefully even better progress for children in schools.
So that leads me to my next question. What is the state of education in South Carolina?
We're still pretty much at the bottom of the heap for a lot of different reasons. One of the things, though, that I think is encouraging is we are no longer following the No Child Left Behind curriculum. Well, actually, we stopped as of May about 2015. We're now under ESSA, Every Child Succeed Act, which
Right.
I think is going to be very promising. I attended a forum, and the teachers were particularly pleased that they are now going to be more in charge of dictating the success of their classroom as opposed to such onerous testing. And it was very interesting to learn how much they had been doing before versus what they're going to have an opportunity to do now. Something that struck me, Quintin, one of the facilitators said, we know our classrooms, we know what it takes to succeed, we know the kids who have problems, we know their families, we know why they have problems. Now this gives us an opportunity to have a little bit more freedom to address those issues by connecting not only them with wraparound services, but by directing that child to a better rate of achievement that's not related to testing and not forcing children to test when we know the end results aren't going to do well because they're not supported. So I'm hoping that the ESSA will open a door for some other things. That's one part. The second part is funding. The state legislature needs to do something a little bit differently with respect to funding both the classroom and our teachers. Our teacher pay is abysmal in this state, Quintin. And we're losing teachers in droves. And what happens when you lose teachers? You end up with larger class sizes because you have to double up, or you end up having a substitute all year, and that's not teaching. So we've got to look at some things differently at our state level if indeed we're going to have the kind of change, sustainable change that we want to see.
So where is the money?
The money's in the State House, but it's not being allocated. And what I hear so often is, well, we don't want to raise your taxes, well, we don't want to, but at some point we're paying for the state that we are in. So you've got to spend money, you've got to invest. And here's the piece that's irksome. We want to take the money from neighborhood schools and give it to private schools and give it to charter schools. I have nothing against private schools, I have nothing against charters, but don't gut the neighborhood school. Let's fix it. Let's make it workable. That's the better option, I think.
And when I talk to a lot of state representatives and state senators for Quintin school subs, it's always a topic right now. It's a hot topic about safety for the kids. Is it SORs that we need more, or is it metal detectors in your mind?
Well, I'll tell you what we don't need. We don't need armed teachers. That's a non-starter. Metal detectors are expensive, but here's the thing. Parents have said they don't want the school to be a fortress. They have concerns about that. I think SROs can play a very valuable role. I've also seen some that have gone completely off the rails, and I remember the young lady in Columbia who was thrown across the room. You remember that horrific
Richland
video?
County.
Yeah, so I think that with guidance, they can be a supportive part of the structure of the school. But it's also going to take parent engagement, PTA engagement. It's going to take a community to be engaged. And we're also going to have to really, Quentin, look at, and this doesn't get talked about a lot, more guidance counselors and psychologists to do assessments. In some cases in our schools, there are backlogs of children who need to be assessed for any number of challenges. That's not happening, and sometimes we find that, particularly with shootings, there were some mental issues that were red flags that just either didn't get noticed or weren't responded to. We've been so blessed in Charleston County not to have anything happen. But Quentin, we can no longer sit back and say, this isn't going to happen here. Just a few weeks, maybe a month or two ago, a young man at Trident Tech brought an AR-15, handguns, and knives to school. And he began texting someone in class. That could have been a disaster. So something's got to give. It's got to start in our homes. It's got to start with, if you're a gun owner, and I have nothing against gun owners, lock those guns up. Practice responsible usage. Talk to your children. If they bring friends over, do those kids' friends know that you have guns in the house? Do they know that the parents know that? Children are always watching, Quentin. They're watching everything. And here recently we had a little 3-year-old who shot himself.
In Colleton County.
How did that baby get that gun? And what happened? So it's not just mass shootings, it's the whole package. And what I hope, Quentin, is that we're finally getting to a point where we're going to talk about it. And even if we take little bite-sized pieces. I am encouraged about this. Sandy Hook's promise, which I've talked about, lobbied for a year for the Stop the School Violence Act. Congressman Sanford voted against it. It ultimately passed in the $103 trillion bill, omnibus bill. But I don't understand how you could vote against anything that could do possibly one thing to save our children. So I'm encouraged that it passed, and I appreciate the parents at Sandy Hook so much. Because, Quentin, their children are gone, but every day they get up and fight for hours. That means a lot.
You talk about that I'm stumbling now.
Omnibus. I can't say it either sometimes.
The omnibus bill, what would you put in that bill and what would you take out in your mind?
Oh gosh, we don't have time enough to talk about what I would take out and put in. It's massive, but I'll tell you this, I would make sure that health insurance for children is secure. And I say that, Quentin, because I understand that there's a $15 billion rescission bill to pull out health care, to impact out. That keeps me up at night. There's just no excuse for that. So I would make sure that things surrounding children, after school care, which is also facing cuts, those pieces, I would start there.
And you talk, obviously, with the folks at the Daniel Allen Marina about the environment. How is our environment right now?
Oh, it's gorgeous out, but no seismic testing and no offshore drilling.
Okay.
And this came up once before, Quentin, when I ran 3 years ago. Someone said, well, if you put the platform way out, and if something happens, it'll be okay. And I said, no, all it takes is one thing happening, and our way of life is jeopardized. So I don't think that's the answer. But let's look at developing other clean alternatives. How about some wind? We've got wind, we've got that beautiful turbine up at Clemson. Let's figure that out. There's some young men up in Seneca who are developing electronic buses. Let's go get them, cut them in half because our streets are small. Let's do some things here. I mean, and that's more a statewide, so if there's legislation that can be drafted federally to support that infrastructure, I'm all about that because you see the mess we're in. So I think back, Quentin, to the mid-90s when we were looking hard to get that T-21 money to finish the bridge.
Right.
Those kind of federal dollars are critical, and we're all waiting on this new infrastructure package, which has been delayed and delayed. So we got to see what's in that and how that might help us here at home.
Is politics part of that delay in the package?
Politics is a part of everything, Quentin. I think it's just perhaps the agenda has been somewhat derailed, and I'll just be diplomatic on that.
What should the agenda be in your mind?
Well, not being at the presidential level, I would say my focus with respect to the first district is being responsive to what constituents have said, what they want to see, what they'd like to hear. Another interesting piece is very large Gullah Geechee community
Right.
that's concerned about the reauthorization process. How long will that last? Is there any jeopardy of that going away? Because that whole part of our history is still waiting to be explored, and it adds such a richness to South Carolina and indeed the entire coast, and it's also affected by events that happen along the coastline. So it's all of those pieces. It's being responsive, it's honoring constituent wishes, marrying that against what we can do, and also being a part of the leadership that helps to shape and determine this country by making laws and policies that are beneficial for all people, not a select few.
And you talk about listening to things. I know that the Republican side of the candidates will have their congressional debate June 1st, that is, at the Yorktown. Crazy question. What would you like to hear from them as far as the issues concerning the first district?
That's an interesting question. I don't often think about what I want to hear from them. I think what's important is things that I have yet to hear, which is around safety, sensible gun control. I think that that's important. Social justice, which you'd almost never hear because they don't consider that important. The shenanigans that went on in the State House recently with respect to women and reproductive rights, how do they justify that? What are their thoughts around that? I think those issues are important.
Toby Smith, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this. And a side note, I repeatedly asked Joe Cunningham to do an interview with me, but he has not responded to me yet. So whenever he wants to do an interview, he's welcome to be on Quintin's Close-Ups again. But thank you for your time.
Thank you, Quintin, for everything you do. It's good to see you.
Likewise. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.